JHK here for the AllStar, and joining me right now is MMA trailblazer Sarah Kaufman. Sarah, thank you so much for joining me. You've been fighting for so many years. This is the first time I get to interview you. I'm so happy.
No, it's great to talk to you. And I apologize if this one falls out. It's just the cauliflower ear, so I'll just constantly fix it. But earbuds just don't really work for my awesome MMA ears.
Yeah, fighter problems, right? Now, you fought the best of the best throughout your career: Rousey, Carmouche, Davis, Tate, Shevchenko. Do you ever sit back and try to digest the level of competition that you have battled throughout all those years?
Not really. I mean, for me, it's just always been the next challenge, the next person, whether I'm at the top, whether they're at the top, and whether they're like a last replacement. I mean, Valentina, we literally had no idea who she was. I was supposed to fight Germaine Durand. Fight fell through, and 8 days before, 7 days before, I get this message saying, "Hey, this girl, Valentina Shevchenko." I'm like, never heard of her. Let's do it. So it's one of those things where you just, in the moment, you just take these fights and you take the opponent for who they are. And I guess after the fact, you can be like, yeah, I fought some really good people, but I'm also really good. So, everyone else should hopefully want to fight me. And it hasn't been that way for a few years where people have definitely not wanted to fight me, but it's part of the journey. And, I've always had aspirations of being the best in the world, and I still do. And I know that I can get there as long as I have girls and opponents who are willing to step in the cage with me. So that's going to always be the hardest part, is striving to be the best and trying to get those opportunities in any way I can.
Yeah, it trips me out because you would think fighters would want to fight you because of your resume, but it's the opposite.
Well, fighters want to fight someone with a resume if they think they're going to win. And when they don't think they're going to win, or they think it's going to be a tough fight, or if it's, someone who's a really good wrestler, good grappler, people are like, well, I'll just punch her in the face and it won't matter. With me, they know they're going to get punched in the face. They know that I'm going to be in there for the full time, pushing the pace, being in your face, technically sound, throwing hard. I have good wrestling. I have good jujitsu. I don't have any gaping holes. And so I think that it's a tough fight to want to take if you're not certain that you're going to get that win, especially if you're outside of one of the big organizations. To take a really tough fight, if you don't win, it puts you back. And if you do win, it's huge, but the payoff can be a little bit tougher where there's easier roads to get there. So would I want to fight someone of my caliber in a small promotion without getting paid as much as I think I should for fighting a huge name? I wouldn't. Like, I get it. But as the person who is that person, I want everyone to fight me. And I'm like, why don't you want it? Just use me as a stepping stone. Try and use me as a stepping stone. And then I'll flatten you. And then it won't have been worth it for you, but it'll be worth it for me. So, I mean, I'd sign up.
Yeah, for sure. And like when I got heavy into the sport, it was like during the Strike Force era. So I remember you back then, and Misha and even Alexis Davis and Carmouche. You guys are all still competing today at the highest level. Do you think Ronda Rousey would have been dominant in this era?
I mean, I don't think it's that different, honestly, than it was when she was around. I think everyone's gotten better, but so would she would have gotten better. So if you're taking Sarah Kaufman from 2006 and putting her in right now, I wouldn't have done that well. But if you're taking Sarah Kaufman of 2021 and putting her in, she's going to do well. And I'm sure that Ronda would have been kind of the same with the skill set that Ronda had. If we're saying Ronda from then, I still think she would have done well. But then you're going to kind of hit that stride where people start to know who you are. They start to know how to figure you out. And you don't have that surprise factor anymore where people aren't sure how you're going to react in certain situations. And unfortunately, I think one of the biggest letdowns for Ronda was her mental game. I think that she could have developed her skill set if she needed to, but I think that the mental strain, and whether that's from the notoriety, the fame, the outside obligations and pressures that she was feeling, or maybe it was something deeper seated from like her childhood, or it seemed a lot of the times that she was constantly trying to prove to someone, the fans, the bullies from high school, the people who picked on her when she was a kid, as opposed to being in the present and prove the Ronda Rousey of the present and right now. So I don't know. I don't know. I'm sure she would have done well if she wanted to do well. But there's definitely something to be said for the longevity of some of the people who've been in the sport for I've been in the sport for 15 years. I'm still loving it. I'm still getting better. I'm still striving to be the best, and knowing that I have the opportunity to push my ceiling even higher. And for me, if I don't feel that I have that opportunity, then I won't be fighting anymore. So maybe that's what Ronda realized. She'd reached her ceiling and she wanted to move on and step away from the limelight and kind of do her own thing. She now has a kid and family, and seems to be hopefully really happy. So that works for her. And when I'm ready, I guess I'll step back and do the same thing. But right now, I know I have more growth left in me.
Yeah, definitely. You haven't hit your ceiling, and you've been down at Syndicate MMA working with the team. How has that experience been with such a large group of women on the mats?
It's always great. For years, I kind of said, does it really matter? I have really good guys to train with. I have some girls. But does it matter that I have a ton of women or not? And I never really used to think that it mattered that much. But it's different when you're around competitive women. It's something that maybe it's a matter of, that men genetically tend to be stronger. They tend to be a little bit more athletic in some ways. Uh, and so because of that, you can sometimes get a little bit complacent in saying, well, on a woman that would have worked. On someone that I'm fighting, they would never be able to hold me down like that. Or whatever your kind of excuses are that are in there. But when you're training with women, they're your size. They're smaller than you. They're bigger than you. And if something's working, it's working. If something's not working, there's a reason why. And you can't blame it, or you can't get used to the fact of going in for a takedown, getting stuffed because they're bigger, and then you never finish your shot. So I think it's really important to be around other competitive, high level women, and get different looks. Like for this fight, having Jessy be left handed, I was fortunate that when I went down there, one of the girls named Avery, she's left handed. Ramona, who I'm pretty sure that she's down there. And so I worked with her quite a lot, which was awesome. She's heavier than I am. She's southpaw. She has a great skill set, great attitude. So it's just seeing these different looks and these different abilities to get challenged and pushed and put in terrible positions, and help yourself get better, and also share what I've learned over the time that I've been in the sport with others. And we kind of have that give and take. It is incredible. And it was just fortunate. I'm happy that Joanne and John got married. And I was already planning to go down there and just extended my trip because I had a camp. And it was a really great time. They're a great group.
Speaking of John Wood, I remember I've only seen you fight one time in person live, which was in Korea of all places. John was actually cornering against you in that fight. What do you remember most about that trip?
Well, I mean, I guess the biggest thing I remember is showing up to fight and then leaving and being like, I don't think I'm getting paid. That sucks. But a year later, I got a text message or WhatsApp saying, hey, what's your bank account info? And I thought, this might be a scam. But turns out I got paid. So that was a bonus. I mean, the crowd in Korea was so different. It was a pretty small crowd. Like, they didn't really have much advertising, I don't think. But either way, like, the people who were there were into it. But it was my first time kind of having like a crowd in Korea, in Japan. And what I've heard from the Asian culture, they really respect the actual sport. They don't want the blood. They don't want the gore. They like clap politely for a good takedown. Like for a grappling exchange, it's like, ooh, ah, like a little clap. I thought that was pretty cool. Very different than like the raucous American crowd that is yelling at you to like knee them in the nuts or whatever they're yelling. But different and awesome, none the same. So it was a fun time. It was a great trip, and it was a really fun experience.
I'm just happy that you got paid. I'm
Me
just
too.
happy about that. And a year
Me
later,
too. I was
better late than never, right?
Yeah, better late than never. And at that point, I'd written it off. I'd said, well, at least I got to fight, and for me, at least I got to win. I think if I had fought, lost, and then not gotten paid, that would have been way worse. But the fact that I had a win was like, okay, I had an opportunity to fight, got back in the cage, wasn't sitting around, and then a bunch of time later, full year, I got a transfer. So it turned out all right.
Definitely. Now you returned November 20th, BTC 13 main event. When was the last time you've competed in Canada?
In Canada.
It's been a while, right?
Well, no, I guess for a few of the UFC fights I fought in Canada, so it would have been 2013, 2014, I think. 2015. 2015 was the last time I fought in Canada. But yeah, so I fought like the first part of my career, my first 5, 6 fights were all in Canada, and then most of them were all in the States. And then after I lost to Marloes, I had one fight in Victoria. It's the only fight I've had in my hometown. And most of them, again, have been kind of in the States with a few in Canada. So it's been a while. I love fighting in Canada. It's always like a great vibe. You know, Canadians are inherently pretty friendly and pretty supportive. So it'll be fun to just hop on a plane, be in Canada, pop back a few days later, hopefully with a big win, a big finish.
Definitely your opponent, Jessy Miele. She's a Bellator veteran. Thoughts on the matchup and her skill set?
You know, I think that Jessy is all around a pretty great fighter. She's she's had a couple fights in Bellator. Aside from that, we've actually been scheduled to fight a few times, or we've been talking about fighting each other a few times, and it's just never really fully come to fruition. Always the top was at 135, so this one's at 145, so she'll definitely have the size advantage on me. But you know, my last 2 fights were at 155, so in some ways it'll be nicer. They're a little bit closer to my size, and this was an opportunity to take a fight and be able to kind of like really showcase my skills. I'm again looking for a finish, want to make a statement. I'm not here to just get wins and you know kind of get lackluster decisions. I want to go in there and show what I have, how I've improved. Uh, Really, you know, I haven't used my elbows. PFL, you weren't allowed to use elbows, so just like an elbow smash finish would be like the best.
Chef's kiss.
Yeah, exactly. Joanne would love it. Joanne Calderwood, she elbows me all the time. Ramona's picked up on some of those elbows, you know. So it's time that I elbow someone else back.
Yeah, first. What was I gonna say? Yeah, with this fight, you know, I mean, I think it's a great matchup, and you know, she does have a good. She has some good experience, right, coming into this fight,
For sure.
and the elbows. Yeah, that's what I was thinking about. The elbow, not being able to elbow, was that just like a huge weapon just taken away from you when you were competing for PFL?
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things where when you're allowed to use them, it's incredible and it's so fun. But when you're not allowed to, you just your mind kind of has to change and you have to shift and not look for them. I think ground and pound wise, if there aren't elbows, it can be hard because sometimes you just don't have the space to do a big punch, whereas an elbow can chop in and do more damage. Um, yeah, I mean, I just kind of trained my brain to not use them for a little while, and now it's happy that they're back. So I'm sure looking to land some if
Yeah,
possible.
yeah, release the elbows. Now,
Exactly.
your thoughts on Canadian MMA. You know, right now the state of it.
I would say that it's kind of coming back a little bit. There was quite a long period where there was a big lull because the commissions all started allowing MMA, which was great, but then they also made it really hard to hold events. Like I know that uh, for a lot of like the local promotions in BC, it was super expensive. So any small promotions pretty much couldn't afford to run a fight card because just the cost was too high. And so because of that, I feel like it kind of died a little bit for a while. There weren't many feeder leagues that were hosting these cards, whereas before you could have, you know, many every month you'd have quite a few cards. I feel like it's starting to come back. You have, you know, BTC, you have a couple promotions that are more in Alberta, you have Battlefield, you have Rise FC that are kind of out more BC way. So it seems like there are some that are coming back and that are starting to get some traction to be able to build up some fighters, because it seems like we've had a big break of having like a lot of pros or quite a few pros in the big leagues and then people coming up, and then for a while we've had almost no one coming up, so you have this big gap between people with quite a lot of experience and almost zero experience, and don't really have many people in that medium range where they're now not novice anymore, but they're not necessarily ready for the elite of the elite. They're kind of in that middle scheme, starting to get ready for maybe something like Dana White Contender Series or some of the shows that are like that next step up from the grassroots. So I'm glad to see that that's happening and that it's starting to pick back up because it's needed. It's such a great sport, and if we don't have those grassroots levels, there's no way to get experience if you don't have it in your home country. because it's hard. How do you convince someone from another country to fly in your fighter if they're 0-0 or 1-0 as a pro? They don't know what they're getting. So grassroots is definitely where it's at. It's nice to see it's coming back.
Judging, it has been attention, a focus for a lot of people watching the sport. And recently, Colorado, they adopted open scoring. And Kansas, they've been using it for a while. Japan's using it for a long time. What are your thoughts on that system and how it will impact fights?
I think there's pros and cons to every system. I think, excuse me, not bored. I think that when you have, anytime there's a new rule set, people will try and work to the line and nudge up as close to that rule set as possible to get as much advantage as possible. So when you have a 10-9 must system, you can eke out a round, get a 10-9, and barely do anything and just do just enough to get the win if you wanted to. And so you have people doing that. Whereas when you have, like the Pride style where your fight is scored as a whole on who's trying to finish a fight, people are trying to finish fights because you could eke out 10 minutes the first 10-minute round, and then in the last run, they hit you really hard and you lose. So that leads to more reckless fights, but it also leads to people actually trying to finish the fight. 10-9 comes into play. People start working the system. They start gaming it a little bit. Oh, well, we know that judges count takedowns as important. So if I get a takedown in a close round with 1 minute left and I can hold them down, I would likely sway the judges. Like, for sure, that's a thing. And as a fan and as a fighter, even as an athlete, you're like, well, but they didn't do anything with the takedown. But you're like, oh, but they got the takedown. Even if other things have happened, that's the last thing you see. So it's hard to not do that, I guess, if you know that that's going to be valued. So when you come to the open scoring, I think you're going to have some people who it's going to motivate them because, oh, they know for sure that I'm down on the cards. So I have to get a finish or I'm losing. That's going to be helpful because there's other times where you think, oh, I think that I'm good. I think I've won the first two. Maybe you do a little bit too much coasting in the third to be careful. You end up losing that round and it turns out you lose the fight and maybe you would have done more. But then you're going to have the coasting factor where it's going to be, I know that I'm up and all I have to do is mitigate the damage enough that they don't finish me. Everyone's going to use it in one way or the other. I think that it's, as an athlete and I think as a coach, to know exactly where you stand is very important. To know, hey, look, I thought I won those, but the judges don't. They didn't think that. I know that I'm down. And so this is do or die. I win this fight by finishing this round, or I lose this fight without any question, versus thinking that you've done one thing and then finding out later that it's something else. So I like the open scoring. You're going to get some people coasting, but then it's just all the more reason for the person who's losing to try and really finish the fight. So I think that it's a good idea.
Even though it's a good idea, they're not going to implement it in your fight on November 20th, main event, BTC 13. Sarah Kaufman is back. Thank you so much, Sarah, for the time. Enjoy the fight and just enjoy life.
Yeah, thank you so much. Yeah, I really hope that everyone can watch it. And, I'm actually pretty fortunate that even it's been a short camp, I've had some pretty awesome sponsors step up and companies. So if I can just thank them, that'd be great. I mean, have to thank, of course, my team, Zuma in Victoria, my coach, Adam Zuzek, Syndicate for hosting me and having me down there and letting me beat them up and having them beat me up. And then I have MGM Mechanical, TCF Contracting, Dark Horse Farms, Fuel Supplements Victoria. I'm just so fortunate that I have such amazing people around me supporting me and helping me along the way. So hopefully you guys can all watch BTC 13, November 20th, headlining